Hey everybody, Jeff Munn. I am here with Ken Goulet today, and Ken and I have known each other for 20 plus years, although we really just got to know each other, I think, since you retired from Anthem and I kind of went out on my own as a coach, and you were running a big chunk of Anthem's business at the time, and you have this encyclopedic memory. You remembered a meeting that we were in together that I didn't remember, Ken. It was kind of amazing to me. So it's been good to, reminisce about the world that we came from. And now it turns out that the worlds we are in kind of overlap. So you've been advising some emerging healthcare startups, a couple of them very successful. I've been out on my own coaching, mostly founders, some of them in healthcare. And we were just talking about leadership and thought we'd get together and have a conversation about leadership challenges that we see. And I love, the mentorship that you have given me, Ken, over the years. And I always love picking your brain on all things leadership. So I appreciate you agreeing to do this recording today, and we'll see what comes of it.
My pleasure. Look forward to chatting with you, and I know it's a lot of fun topics.
Yeah, yeah. So, one of the things that we talk about, Ken, is you're in this world of startups and VCs and money and efficiency and financial models. And there's also this fuzzier thing called leadership that often ends up making the difference in whether a startup succeeds or fails. What are some of the things that you see that pop out at you as like, if I see this, I know things are going well. If I see this, wow, this startup's going to struggle a little bit. Like, what's the landscape look like?
Landscape's all over the place with companies at various stages, and I believe that the job of a founder and CEO of an emerging company is a extremely challenging job, but an extremely exciting job. And a lot depends on what stage of the company it's in. Is it right at launch? Is it in a growth stage? Is it in a execution stage? But I would say in general, a startup company is a roller coaster ride for the founder and for the entire executive team. It's an exciting roller coaster ride, but there's ups and downs, and there's going to be good stages and there's going to be challenges. And one of the key things is being able to keep your seatbelt on, stay in a roller coaster ride, and not let the emotions get hold of you. I would say that probably the most important thing of any company of any stage in either a startup, a venture, or a PE mode is growth. So it's all about revenue, but it's how do you build the right team, the culture, and everything else to get there. And I would say probably five things are, when you're saying what is the most important, I'd say one is building the team.
Uh,
You cannot succeed without a good team. Jeff, that's what you always coach. That's what you help everyone on is you've got to have the best players on the field. And you do have to have the best players on the field to succeed. You can work 100 hours, and if you don't have the right team around you, you're not going to succeed. But you could be, I wouldn't say incompetent, but less skilled. And
yeah,
if you have excellent people around you, it's going to go and you're going to do very, very well. In
yeah,
a startup, second is focus. You're touring a lot of different directions. You're doing everything, and you're responsible for payroll, making sure you have enough funding and that you have enough revenue to be able to pay payroll. But it's doing everything from growing the company to running operations to raising money if necessary. So a CEO can get caught up in a struggle of just I would say anxiety of so many things hitting at once, and it's his or her responsibility to work through, keep a focus, and those who are around them try to get
mhm,
focused and not grab every golden ring that comes along, because there's a lot of exciting things that sound like they can help you, but if you have a path, it's good to stay on the path or do a good assessment if you're going to go off it.
yeah,
um, Emotional management, I would just say it is a roller coaster ride, but the CEO is the leader of the team and the face of the company. And even if you get smacked in the face with a bad situation, you can lead your team and let them know where you're at, but you certainly don't want to let your down bring them down. You need to know how
Mm,
important it is, but I would moderate the highs, although celebrate the highs, but definitely moderate the lows. Delegation important for anyone, whether it's a startup or a big corporation like I was in, but more important in a startup and emerging company because you're bringing team members around you. You got so much on your plate that you need to use your team members as best as possible and make sure that they're contributing 100%. And then I would also say working with your board, and that's new for some founders. Many have
yeah.
been CEOs before, some haven't. Notice I use working with your board rather than managing your board. I
Mhm.
don't see it as a job. I see it as an interaction and one where there should be full transparency. So the board is aware of the challenges and problems and are there to help you, rather than have a founder go down a path of trying to spruce things up and make it look great for the board and then playing catch up all the time. You got a group of people around you who are there to help you if you have a good relationship. I think transparency is critical, working with the board, getting their help, but certainly not wasting time spending uh, hours and hours and even tens of hours preparing board decks to make things look so pretty when in fact there's challenges and you should just work through the problems and how are we going to work through those. So those are
Yeah.
kind of, Jeff, what I would say are key for a founder.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love this, and I'm looking at each of them and thinking about the different topics that come to mind. But when you were talking about transparency and working with the board, it seems like transparency is consistent across all five of the things that you mentioned, that it plays
It
a
is.
role in, yeah. So for example, some of these are really closely related, like building a team and delegation. And you mentioned if the CEO is working 100 hours a week, probably not a good sign, right?
Yep.
First of all, that's not sustainable. Second of all, and what I've seen in some of the founders that I've worked with is there is this sense of this is my idea. I am the smart person who knows the way. I'm the only one who can do it right. And that gets in the way of both building a team and delegating. Like, how often do you see that, and how do you help people get through it? Because
Yeah.
that could be a really interesting place to get stuck.
Yeah, I think we all have different personalities and how we look at it. So how do you get through it? It's a different journey for everyone. But
Yeah.
I'd say whether you're in a startup or even in a large corporation, I was a large corporation. I had at its highest point 50,000 people reporting to me and was working through many things. But you almost have to delegate, but you also everyone naturally thinks you do things better than those around you. It's just as natural. My way is better. What I
Yeah.
always used to really encourage myself was that if someone could do 80% as good as what I thought I could do, I should give it
Mhm.
to them and let them grow. And what I usually learned was they did it better than me. It was the thought going in that
Yeah.
held me back.
Yeah.
But once they had full reign, had the accountability, the responsibility, they did great. So I always think giving it is important, delegating, but you have to mentally and go through that process. And one thing that as when I'm on boards or others, one suggestion I give many people is, hey, there's a couple times during the year you should literally spend 2 to 3 hours on your own to look through what your weeks are composed of and what are you doing that you can give to a team member. And one of
Mhm.
the times I always did was between Christmas and New Year's, because what a great time to start new directions for your team going into the new year. And I would spend time to literally go through everything and I would come out and just say, hey, I spent some time this holiday. I'd like to have others help me in different areas. And here's where I'm going to ask your help. And I would work with each of the individuals. But it takes work to delegate, but
Yeah.
that's only a little work. It saves a ton of work to delegate. So it's well worth the upfront time.
Yeah. So part of the delegation I find is, there's a couple kinds of delegation. One is Ken, you saying, okay, I have this task, I need this person to do it, and I need this person to do it exactly the way that I would do it.
Yeah.
And then there's this other way that it's like, I have this goal, and I want you to be responsible for the goal. And I don't really care how you get there as long as you meet the goal.
Yeah.
And I tend to think of that one as being the one that longer term is going to serve the organization better. Um, and what are your thoughts on like maybe a personal experience of, hey, this person came up with something I would have never come up with in a million years, and boy, am I happy I did that.
Oh, I agree 100%. And I think the setting the goal and the objectives is more important than setting a task. A task is probably more at a director level basis where you're
Yeah.
letting a line level person or other, but there are some tasks you may assign at an executive level. I think the goals are the key is being very prescriptive in what you want to accomplish and
Hmm.
having some clarity in what the goal is, and then
How to
using
measure
check,
it.
yeah, using
Yeah.
checkpoints depending on how comfortable you are with the executive. Some may be very few, some may be a little more frequent, just to talk and see how it's going and to
Yeah.
continue to guide. I do, you said an example. I could give you dozens of examples, but I'll say because I was very proud of my team, and I actually think um, individually and combined. They were all smarter and better. I was just in a different role, and they were wonderful. One thing is going way back a decade from now, but going back to 2014 when the Affordable Care rolled out, that was a major impact. The analysts felt it was going to have literally $500 million plus impact to our company. We were a individual and small group company as well as large in ASO, and it was going to affect us more than most other public companies. Um, Put one individual in charge. I won't say the name just not to embarrass the individual, but put an
Uh-huh.
individual in charge. Um, Went through what are our options, and I would just say that individual was and his team was able
Mm.
to run a process that beat the wildest expectations for the first couple of years that we had and what the street had of us. But bottom line, extremely successful. And the ideas, um, I won't get into the detail or granular detail. I'll just say they started with thinking that we were going to have health clubs and attract the healthy
Uh-huh.
to switching to understand that the Affordable Care Act had evolved to more of a point like Medicare and others where there was risk rating, and we would have to understand in critical detail of how the program worked to be able to understand how to best offer products for our members and make sure that we were offering high quality care at the lowest cost possible. But
Yeah.
letting that go, that could have crushed me if it went the wrong way, simply because it was such a large piece of my business. And by letting the entire goal go and have a good professional lead it, it beat my wildest expectations and everyone else's expectations as well.
So how do you personally let go of something that if it doesn't go right, it could, in your words, crush you? That seems really like it requires a lot of courage.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if it's courage, but it is confidence in the people and your teammates.
Mhm.
So that is an acquired confidence. As someone does well, you're willing to give more and more. I had highest confidence in this person, and I just gave something huge. But I would also say that, um, when you're coaching individuals, you say to have a good balance in life. I didn't learn that until after I retired. I worked way too many hours when I worked. And while I enjoyed it and loved it, there were areas that I could have delegated better. But as I was doing the major projects, it really took just a comfort level in the team
Uh-huh.
and watching successes build. So, like this person, I became much more comfortable because they had done so many good things. On this process, it was, I'm just going to let it roll. I'll have check ins, I'll see where
Uh-huh.
we're going. I absolutely trust their judgment, their knowledge, and their ability to build out a strategy to be able to address this major change to the business.
That's fantastic. So if you go back to, in your corporate career and that lack of balance, like looking back, I mean, I don't have any idea how many hours you were working. Like what did it look like for you? And if you could do it all over again, what would you have done differently? What would have felt more effective, more sustainable? Like, how do you think about that?
I think I learned more towards the latter part of my career. I always do say that hard work creates luck and creates success. So I do think working hard is important, but I do
Yeah.
think balance is critically important, and you cannot overwork yourself into success. You do need to
Yeah.
have balance, and you do need to understand the all the attributes that a team could give to you. So, what did I work? I worked too many. I probably in the middle part of my career worked 80 hours a week.
Uh-huh.
Uh, by far too many.
Yeah.
As I matured and assessed myself, assessed what I was doing, assessed my balance of life, I was able to come to a realization that exactly like I said, you can work 80 hours a week and not succeed. It all depends on your team. So I
Hmm.
first gave focus on my team to make sure that I had the best team possible, and that was scaled to the size of the business and greater. And then it did take a little bit of time, but it was getting more and more comfortable delegating and having fun watching them grow in their roles. So
Uh-huh.
towards the end, I can't say I was working less than 40 hours a week, but I could say that I was much closer to it and I was
Yeah.
very comfortable with my work-life balance.
Yeah. What was the moment that you thought, yeah, this isn't working very well? I mean, do you remember a particular insight that you had, or did this just happen over time, kind of as you got more comfortable with the team?
I think partially over time and partially what every executive should do is assess you should do a rating of yourself
Yeah.
of what have I done in the past, how successful has it been, and what should I do in the future. I actually probably believe it tied in when I was turning 50. And what I did when I turned 50 was, what have I done with my first half? And being optimistic, what am I going to do with
Yeah.
the second of my life?
Yeah.
So similar to a coach at, let's say, the championship football games this last week, or a coach of a basketball team at
Yeah.
mid point says, what do you do different? And I did come to a realization that um, am I practicing what I preach to others? Am I having the best approach to work and life possible? And what can I do different? And that is when I started doing the 2 times a year assessments of what can I delegate more? How can I get
Mhm.
my team more involved? And
Mhm.
what's the best way to run this business?
Yeah. Yeah. When you're looking at a company today, so I don't know how many companies you're actively advising right now, but um, is a CEO, a founder putting in a ton of hours, is that a net positive or a net negative in your mind?
Um, I'm on several boards. I'm on 5 boards. I've been as high as 13. Once again, I assessed and said I was
Y-
overworking.
Yeah, I know you've been trying to bring that number down. We've
Yeah,
been talking about that.
yeah. And then I also have a number of individual investments, which create some work.
Yeah,
And that I am involved with I would say 35 plus CEOs in different types of just friendships, relationships, or
yeah.
board or advisory roles. I think it's a positive to work hard. It's a negative to overwork.
Mhm.
So I
Well, and
do
how do
think
you, yeah, how do you
I,
identify when you're, which side of the line you're on?
I think the individual has to assess it, and then those around them have to make them aware, because you can be blind to it. So I don't have a perfect number as to how many hours should you work, and a
Well, I
normal
would
work
imagine it varies
in
a
theory
decent
is
amount too.
40, but as a founder, you're going to put a lot more work in initially. It's going to be That's one of the reasons why there's fewer founders. There is
Right.
more work initially. It's a lot of challenges, but if someone's trying to, I would almost put it less in hours than if someone's trying to do it fully themselves
Mm,
versus appropriately using their team. They need to be able to chat with someone, be challenged, and say, what are some alternatives you can do? This doesn't look sustainable.
yeah.
You can get a lot more. Hey, this person looks great. Why aren't you using them more? And there's ways, I believe, to get someone there. I feel that if someone is exhausted, number one, that's too
Yeah.
much work. I think if
Right.
someone is impacting their family circumstances, that is too much work within reason. You should be very aware of that. And I think that if someone has team members that are not working somewheres in the same range, that you're
Hmm.
not appropriately sharing as a team to approach your problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also it's just gonna vary based on where the business is. If you're in the middle of a raise, I was helping a client who, just sold, and it was just a ton of work leading up to that. And so that's just part of the deal. But now, that founder is taking some time off, and you kind of get the cyclical nature of the business. Some of
Yeah.
these things you
During
just aren't going to avoid.
during a raise, a recap, or a sale, a
Yeah.
CEO and maybe a teammate is essentially doing two jobs. You're doing the job of operating the company and growing it, and it is almost a full-time job to do the fundraising or the sale at the same time. But that is, if you do it right and raise enough money so it's not constant, you
Uh-huh.
should be able to work your way through it and then get back to operating for a sustainable period of time before looking
Mhm.
what your options are for the next raise.
Yeah. You were talking about some of the like the emotional management. And I had an interesting conversation with a guy who he's actually a relationship coach. We met at an event and discovered that he was doing relationship coaching and working with more executives. And I am working with, executives and founders. And a lot of times we kind of broach into the topic of their relationship because, we show up as the same person. If we're in
Yeah.
our relationship or if we're at work, we get triggered by the same things. And we had this interesting conversation about vulnerability. And you were talking about transparency. And on the one hand, you said share the successes, but on the other hand, you said kind of shield people from the lows. Like, what do you think is the right amount of vulnerability for a leader to show when they're building a team, building loyalty, not wanting to share too much? Like, how do you draw that line?
Yeah. I think you should be vulnerable, number one. And I think
Yeah.
being honest and transparent is critical. When I said uh, don't let too many lows, I meant emotional lows. You
Yeah.
should share the low of the company. You
Uh-huh.
can share that this is painful, but if you share that I'm devastated, that's going to carry to your folks. And you should be able to say, this is a big hit. Let's get
Yeah.
ourselves around a plan to work our way through it and move forward. So I would say vulnerability is critical because there is relationships with your executive team. Probably the best leaders have strong relationships with everyone across their team.
Hmm.
And the team looks to each other and to their leader to get their energy to move forward. So being both a motivator and being vulnerable is important.
Yeah.
But also, and where I brought the emotional pieces, we all have different emotional regulators.
Right.
And someone is a very emotional leader or a very emotional person, and they're letting their downs really get carried across that they may have more anxiety or more, I would say, lower level thoughts slash depression than others.
Uh-huh.
That is going to bring others down to a lower level than they should be. You don't have to bring them down to where you are. You just have to be honest, transparent, know
Yeah.
the challenge, but try to keep the motivation there and try to keep the morale as good as possible.
Yeah. You were talking about having good relationships across your team, and sometimes you have a good relationship with someone, maybe you brought them in at the very beginning, and there comes a point where they're not the right person anymore. You've called this the fire your friends stage with in conversations with me. Like, how do you know when you're at that moment, and how do you go about doing that? I mean, that's got to
Yeah,
be a really tough call for a leader.
that is a tough call for a leader. And I don't mean straight out just go fire your
I know
friends,
you
but
don't.
there is an awareness that as you start a company, you're bringing a level of individuals that you trust, they trust, and who are coming on board. But it's an early stage company. and they may have different skill sets than what you need as you scale and professionalize. So let's say you're running a startup and you get to, who knows, 200 million of revenue, which could be several hundred people working there. If you've brought someone in who is not used to managing large groups, and you plan on doubling the size in the next 2 years or tripling it in the next 3 years, you realize that that person is not likely capable to move into that role. You first have to assess. Some may be coachable and flexible to move into it, but many will be essentially just scaled out of their role. So
Yeah.
you are in a position where you need to decide what is best for the company. You need to be able to build a team of the best, which means bringing someone in who is best for the company to move forward. Now, that may be that the individual you are replacing or putting someone over them could be very discouraged, could be angry, could be upset, but you can be very fair to them. You can look at if there's appropriate alternatives in the company,
Mhm.
playing a different role. And if that doesn't work out, you can be very fair and a good assessment and treat them well with an exit over time. But it will happen to every founder that the team around you will be very different 4 years from now than it is now, and to be aware of that and realize you should be scaling and professionalizing at all times. It allows you to be comfortable in doing that transition, even though it's a difficult and a little bit uncomfortable transition to do. It's the right thing to run the business and grow the business.
Well, and sometimes that person who needs to be replaced is the founder.
Yes, yes.
And so how do you know?
Um,
Yeah. How do you, like, if you're thinking about that for yourself, like what are the warning signs that when you're working with someone and you're like, I'm not sure they're quite, maybe this is a better person in the early stages, and now that we're growing and having to manage across all these silos and really execute on things, the founder isn't the right person.
Yeah, I think that happens fairly frequently at certain times. And
Uh-huh.
um, I especially like it when the founder themselves are aware of it and through discussions, just chat through it and see what's best for the company. A lot depends on what skill set you come into the role with. If you come in with a good professional skill set, you're going to be able to expand through a lot of founder stages. You may not be able to, let's say, I'll use one of the furthest examples. You may be good at running a company, but if you do an IPO, you may not be good at running a public company,
Hmm.
and you may need to bring people around you. So there's kind of a natural one. But I would say the cool thing about startups is that a lot of them are done by very smart people, very passionate. They see a problem and they are trying to bring to market a way to address that problem and solve that problem. They may be extremely passionate about it and very good, but if they've not run a business before, they
Yeah.
may be maxing out when you get to a couple hundred, 500 person company. So I think many founders realize that and either bring the right support around them and may put a president and COO in, which can cover that,
Hmm.
and work your way through it, or they may work towards the chair of the board. I think the only uncomfortable time is when a company's doing poorly. The founder is not aware that they are part of the challenge, and there has
Mm.
to be discussions around, does this make sense? But if the company's doing well, it really is what is best for the founder, what is best for the company, and there's many different ways to make that work going forward.
Yeah. When you're working with whether it's a leader, a founder, senior exec, um, and you see some of these struggles, how do you help them as a board member or advisor? And what are the types of things where you say, this person might be, maybe they need a mentor, maybe they need a coach, maybe they need some other kind of assistance. Like, how do you make that call? What are the types of things that you look for when you're doing that?
Yeah. Frequently, so I've served on several public boards, lots of private boards, probably, not probably, I think I've been on 28 boards since I left Anthem 10 years
Wow.
ago with many, many exits, which has been great. They're each different. And I think that when you go through the process, I'm usually an independent board member. So I am brought in to be an independent, which may make it easier for me as I'm not representing a private equity firm and I am looking at the good of the company across the board. I try to build a relationship with a CEO where you can have a conversation about what works, what doesn't work, and just, hey, I've been through some of this before, I've not been through others, but here's some thoughts and observations. What I've loved is that different CEOs have, of course, approached it very different, but most have been very open to trying to work with what I would call a free coach, someone
Uh-huh.
who is trying to help a little, but not with the focus and not the full attention. But I've had one very experienced CEO who was on a public company asked me to attend his all associate meetings and two of his executive team meeting in a row just to give him feedback on how he was interacting with his team and his associates. Now, that is, I would say, a level of trust. And I loved being asked because it was like, this person knows I'm just going to be objective. I'm going to try to give my
Right.
thoughts at my end. What I loved was this person just wanted to get better.
Yeah.
And they were looking towards saying, hey, I'm doing good. I'm running a great company, but how can I be better? And can you give me some thoughts and feedback? So to me, the best situation is one where there is a strong relationship in place and you're both looking to do to the best. And I think all of us as executives work our heads off. We really care, but we can get better if someone's giving us thoughts, whether it's
Yeah.
endorsements or whether it's improvement opportunities to get us to think through how can we do better moving forward.
Well, and what I like about that example, one, Ken, says a lot about your relationship with this individual and the level of trust there. But the second is that it points out how difficult it is for a CEO or a founder to get objective feedback from people who work for them.
Yes.
That person who is working for the leader, they always have an agenda. Their number one agenda is to keep their job and to look good, right? And so their ability, even with when the CEO says, "I really want your honest feedback here," their ability to provide that is pretty limited sometimes.
Yeah, I would say that's very true. And in the different roles I've been in, um, I realize that everything that comes to me is filtered.
Yeah,
And you have to just be aware that happens. And we're probably guilty of it ourselves when we were reporting to people. Is sometimes you would massage um, the bad and only give three-quarters of it and try to
right.
work through the rest. I would say that in going through that process, um, there's individuals as a CEO of depending on the size of your company that in general you can rely on more.
Mm.
And a CFO or a chief human resource consultant generally don't have skin in the game as to which decision, how the P&Ls, they're looking out for the best of the company. And I
Yeah.
usually tried to get, I was close with my entire team, but when big decisions came in, I would sometimes ask what I would call the most neutral parties of my
Hmm.
executive team, what do you think about this? And you're hearing two sides of a discussion. Give me your read and what are you thinking? Simply because there are some that are less tied in to the specific issue being addressed. And it's nice to
Right.
be able to get some neutral opinions as well.
Right. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything that, when you think about someone who's watching this, who's, a founder, maybe they're scaling, maybe they're raising money, like what are any issues that you don't feel like we've touched on that you'd really like to point out? Like what's your, kind of the thing that you're passionate about right now, or maybe that you just saw that you want to make sure we talk about?
Now, I'd first say in being the leader of a company, there's controllable and uncontrollable things. And the
Yeah.
controllable things you have are hard work, it's the expertise of building the team. But there are certain things like timing and luck that are
Hmm.
uncontrollable. And some people look at other companies and say, wow, look at how that one took off. And it may be you've done everything right, but others have gotten lucky in a different field. But
Uh,
I would say that it generally does tie into what you're able to address yourself. And I feel that a company, you can feel whether a company is going to be successful highly or not in the first couple of years.
mhm.
That's both how the leadership team interacts with their teams. That's whether there's a market product fit
Uh,
and whether it's going to be quick and up to the right or whether it's going to be more of a harder job to get to full success. But really, the rocket ships, you know, pretty quickly because it's a special combination of people, timing, and market product fit. I
yeah.
would say, though, in managing the controllables, I'll give a little plug for you. Um, I think it's important for all of us as leaders to hone our skill sets.
Mm.
And I've used a coach twice in my career. When I started, probably most coaches were just given to people going out the door. And it was
Yeah,
for a company to
there is
feel
that
good
history,
that
sure.
we're going to give it one more shot and then we're
Right.
going to call. That stopped 2 decades ago. And 2 decades ago, it's transitioned to these are our best people. Let's give them a coach to help get them better. And it's similar to if I were golfing, I'm going to use a coach. If I'm competitive, I'm going to use a coach to try to get better. I think it's the same in a career. We put more time and work than almost anything else, and we should hone the skills. So I would just, as you know, as a parting idea is it is worth considering coaches. May not be the right time, may not be exactly right for all individuals, but if you don't have the time, you should also ask yourself, why don't I have the time?
Yeah.
Because having the time is frequently a sign that you can control things a little bit better if it's only taking a couple hours a week.
Yeah, two things that I hear a lot are I'm too busy for coaching right now. That's always a little bit of a red flag for me, although it is kind of difficult to get through. The other one related to this is, well, after these next couple months, things are going to slow down and then we can talk about
Yeah,
coaching. And that,
usually
it
doesn't
always
happen.
looks like things are going to slow down, but
Yeah.
then if you're used to running hard, magically things are going to show up and you're going to keep running hard. And that's just
That's
one of the
our
things you need to
personality and
address.
role. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. And
Yeah.
you can find the time to do it. I felt I was as busy as anyone. The couple times I did it, I very much learned from it. Both the coaching, but also the process of getting feedback from direct reports and identifying that into action plans and looking at how can I be better working with my team. So I think what you
Yeah.
do is a valuable service to a lot of people.
Well, and I appreciate your support and you have referred clients to me, you've introduced me to people, and I've always been very appreciative to that. The one thing that I do think is true about effective coaching, I think it's a lot about it's a lot like exercise. People say they don't have time to exercise, but if they take care of themselves and they, get to a certain level of fitness, it actually creates more time than it takes up because you have higher
Absolutely.
energy, you have higher focus when you are at work, all these good things. I think effective coaching is the same way. It frees up way more time than it takes.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ken. I appreciate your willingness to have this conversation. Love the back and forth. Anything that you want to offer to people in terms of, I don't know how much active you are actively looking for things, but if I know you've been someone who's always been willing to talk to someone, to mentor someone, do you want to give out any information
No,
on how
I
people can reach you? You're connected to just about everybody anyway,
anyone
so
can connect me, and I have a lot of friends. I am not, I am a happy retiree who is actively reducing rather than adding work. I'm enjoying what
awesome.
I'm doing, but I'm following your advice and my own advice, which is enjoy things as well. And I've been reducing for the last couple of years and going to continue that. So, not at all a
Fantastic.
plug for my services, but if anyone ever wants to talk, and we know each other, I'd be glad to help anyone out.
All right, that's great. Ken, thank you so much and take care.
Yep, good to see you. Bye
All
bye.
right, bye.